This is going to be kind of a turntable-centric video, so if you're into record players and vinyl, then please stick around. If you're a digital-only kind of person who thinks it's all very unnecessary, then you can peruse my other videos where I review and discuss DACs and receivers, amplifiers, loudspeakers, and stuff like that. Why do I like turntables? Because they are incredibly interesting devices. So simple in what they do, yet there's so much complexity in the interactions between each component of a turntable. And a good designer fully understands how each individual part affects the other, and how to mitigate external forces that can interfere with the delicate audio signal that is extracted from that microscopic little groove. Although all the fundamental principles of turntable design was pretty much figured out by the 1960s, the continuous refinement of those principles by manufacturers through the subsequent decades still fascinates me, unlike many other aspects of home audio. I recently made a couple of videos about the British Rega Planar 3, in which I performed some significant upgrades to a stock 1990 model. Tango Spinner, an Argentina-based manufacturer, provided me with a few of their component upgrades to try out. And if you're interested in watching those videos, I will include a link below. The original Rega Planar 3 came to market in 1977 and was then improved with a better tonearm in 1983. They updated it in the year 2000 and renamed it the RB3. And then 16 years later, Rega made further improvements to the design, and it is now called the Planar 3 again, or P3 for short. In this segment, I will do a comparison between my version 1 Planar 3 and the latest third iteration, the P3. My local Rega dealer is House of Stereo in Jacksonville, Florida, who very kindly loaned me a brand new white P3 to use for this video. Now, the original Planar 3 was a value-oriented game changer in the turntable world when it was introduced, especially after they updated the tonearm with their self-designed RB300. Now, that tonearm may look rather understated, but the rigid one-piece cast aluminum shaft and high-quality bearings has a long reputation of outperforming much more expensive tonearms. And they sold thousands of these tonearms to enthusiasts who use them on many non-Rega turntables. And at the original price of only £90, you may understand why. Roy Gandy, the founder of Rega and chief designer of the Planar 3, had the idea that instead of engineering a high-mass, heavy turntable to suppress unwanted vibrations from reaching the cartridge's stylus, he designed a lightweight model with a low-mass plinth and subplatter. He believes that resin energy or vibrations that reach the turntable should be quickly released and dissipated, rather than stored in a heavyweight plinth, where it can have a detrimental effect on the music's fidelity. Did I say detrimental? Detrimental. 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 Now, this design gives Rega turntables a reputation for sounding quick, rhythmic, and energetic, like a nimble sports car rather than a heavy, more luxurious sedan. Looking at the two turntables, they still have the same dimensions, but the new one has a thinner and even lighter plinth. Rega claims it's stiffer and more rigid as well. And they've added a metal brace on top and underneath, and that reinforces the connection between the tonearm and the bearing hub. They're linked now, not separate components. That sounds like a logical upgrade in my opinion. An interesting change is that the power switch has been moved to the underside of the plinth, I assume to give the table a sleeker look on top. At initial glance, the latest RB300 Tonearm does not look all that different from the original RB300, and you can definitely see the heritage that the two arms share. But upon closer inspection, it does appear more refined and polished than the 1980s version. It has a more tapered arm tube, more rounded edges, and a tungsten counterweight. And they say the bearing is also much improved. Rega developed a timeless design that has been working well for 40 years, so there's no real reason for any dramatic changes. And the RCA cables remain captive, but clearly have been nicely upgraded from the older, cheap-looking standard ones. And the Tonearm wiring is also said to have been improved. The platter is still heavy tempered glass with a wool felt mat. However, the older mat is noticeably thicker than the new one. And the new glass platter has a beautifully polished edge now. Under that glass platter, we can see we have very similar, if not identical, phenolic resin or plastic subplatters. That does surprise me a bit, but it is said that this is in line with keeping with the lightweight philosophy of Rega turntables. The two-speed pulley is now aluminum and much nicer than the plastic one from the earlier model. The motor has been upgraded to their 24-volt model, which has a plug-in power cord with a switching power wall wart. Now this can be upgraded for cost to a linear power supply that adds the ability to switch speeds electronically. They stopped making the tinted dust cover decades ago, so they're all clear now. And there are still no springs in the hinges, and they actually appear completely unchanged. It also still has the 3 non-adjustable rubber feet, but they have a different shape now. You can buy the new P3 with Rega's own pre-mounted Elys cartridge, or without it for $270 less. I mounted an Audio-Technica VM540ml cartridge to the modern P3, and I used my old geodisc to set the alignment. Even though I much prefer mounting cartridges on removable head shells, this wasn't too difficult. And Rega makes it easy to adjust the vertical tracking force and bias. But I always use a digital scale to make sure it's exact. Out of the box, the Tonearm lift mechanism needed to be raised as it barely lifted the stylus above the felt mat. Using a small Allen wrench, I was able to easily adjust it to its proper height. This modern Rega P3 is a terrific turntable. They faithfully stuck to their original design philosophy for decades. As this modern version is more refined, yet more agile and fun than my 30-year-old plus unit. There's a popular term that British audio enthusiasts have been using for a few decades: PRAT. Pace, rhythm, and timing. It's kind of a fuzzy term that's difficult to define, but you know it when you hear it. I prefer to describe Pratt as having increased dynamics and a more forward and lively presentation. The P3 in my system has Pratt in spades. It grabs your attention. It's tremendously enjoyable. But it does lack some of the warmth, instrument separation, and soundstage depth of my much pricier Linn LP12. But it makes up for it in the liveliness and rhythmic energy that it presents to the listener. My only real concern with the new model is the cueing mechanism. I'm accustomed to a cueing lever that in almost every turntable I've ever owned that when you lower it, the speed that it drops is damped to lower slowly onto the record surface. In this unit, it's not damped much at all. It falls at the same speed that you move the lever. So you must really pay attention when lowering the tone arm so not to let it drop too rapidly, or you will hear a loud bump. I checked out another P3 at House of Stereo and behaved in the same manner, so that must be how it's made now. The price of the current Planar 3 is $1,125 without the cartridge in the US and $1,395 with the cartridge included. In the UK, the P3 retails for £660, and in other parts of Europe it sells for around 900 euros. Now, Rega turntables are made in the UK, not the Far East, and they sell through a network of dealers, not direct, which means when you purchase one, you'll get expert support, and you won't be out on your own when you need help or advice. I heartily recommend the new P3 to anyone looking to upgrade from an entry-level turntable, or to anyone getting started or back into playing records. If you want to skip that whole entry-level path and get a nice phonograph that you can happily use for decades, it's a no-brainer in my opinion. Going by all the 30-plus-year-old Regas that are still in service today, I'm confident in saying it will last. Yes, I'm aware that I'm wearing a Lynn hat, but I have a really genuine soft spot for British-made gear, and I would proudly wear a Rega hat if they're available or if someone wants to send me one. As I said earlier, this P3 was loaned to me by an authorized Rega specialist, House of Stereo in Jacksonville, Florida. Joe and his team do an amazing job and will make sure you are happy with your purchase. And I highly recommend that you check them out if you're considering any Rega hi-fi gear. I put a link to their website below. If you watch my previous Rega Tango Spinner videos, you will know that my old Planar 3 is now all tricked out with upgraded parts and is performing better than ever. Well, I just received another very substantial Tango Spinner component. It's the Libertango Delrin platter, and this replaces the original glass platter. Delrin is a very dense and heavy resin with similar properties to vinyl records. The advantage of a platter like this is, firstly, it doesn't ring or resonate like glass. Secondly, it does not attract static charges like glass and felt. And the aluminum ring enhances the flywheel effect for greater speed stability. I think it's also cool because a mat is no longer needed. You can place the record directly on the platter if you want. It seems to me that this new platter has elevated the performance to a level that I didn't know was possible. The dynamics are outstanding, and there is an improved clarity to the high frequencies. I need to listen for a longer period of time with some different records to absorb the full measure of the changes that it brings. Tango Spinner upgrades are available from many different Rega models and vintages. Even if you already own a really old model from the 70s or the latest P3, adding a few select Tango Spinner parts could get you to the next level, even to the P6 model for a lot less money.